What I want to be remembered by is the same principles I've spoken by. It's really to build this global community, really passionate about uniting and bringing people together, and to build this global community that unites their hearts and minds around a common vision for healing, for peace, for a better world. And they feel through both uniting people and assisting in activating the things that they've forgotten and activating their innate creative power.
Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast, where we feature inspiring leaders who are helping our world awaken to love. I'm your host, David Trotter, and I'm excited to share with you an inspiring conversation with Tiffani Churchill. She's the founder and CEO of the ALLTRUEistic app. She's also a contributing author in our brand new anthology book called Awakened Hearts, which you can pick up at awakenedheartsbook.com. Now, in this conversation with Tiffani, she shares with us a profound story of awakening, transformation, and healing through the power of setting an intention. She is so focused on setting intentions. And the reason why is because she has seen how it has worked in her life, moving across country with like pennies to her name and finding healing and transformation. And ultimately now utilizing her gifts, her intuition, and this ability to utilize technology for the sake of helping others by launching an app called ALLTRUEistic, ALL. Link is in the show notes, of course. This is a really powerful app that empowers you and me to set an intention for our own lives or for humanity, and then allow other people to join in that intention. And the goal is not only to bring healing and transformation to people individually, but to shape the healing and transformation and the ascension of our planet. You are going to love hearing from Tiffani and learning about this app. Hey, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Awaken Magazine podcast on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Click subscribe, leave a rating or a review. That's an easy way for you to help us spread the word about these amazing interviews that we are sharing with you each and every week. All right, let's dive into this conversation with Tiffani Churchill. Well, Tiffani, it is great to be with you today. Thanks so much for taking time to hang with us.
Thank you, David. I have to say, I'm so impressed with what you're creating with Awaken Magazine that I have really been looking forward to our time together.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I always love to get a question that kind of gets us thinking right off the bat before we dive into your own story. And so one of the things that I know has been very important to you in your own transformation is the power of meditation, but also the power of setting intentions. And so if somebody is listening today and going, meditation, oh man, I don't know if it's hard, it's difficult, I got so much going on in my head, I just can't do this. What would you say to them?
And I love this question because I get this all the time. And so before I dive in and answer the question, I want to go into intention. And so before I do anything that's really important to me, I set an intention. And so, of course, this time together is really important to me. So I want to bring you and the audience into this practice that I use by sharing my intention. And so my intention with our time together is to, of course, have a beautiful and enlightening conversation that empowers everybody that's listening, but also to be able to share just a little bit about my story and then to share some tools that I use so that anyone that is taking the time to be with us today can have these powerful practices that they can walk home with and then hopefully elevate and use to enhance their lives. And so the question about meditation is, like I said, such a question I get all the time. Meditation is hard. And I'm here to say 100%, anybody that thinks that, it is hard. It is a challenge. And I have been meditating since I was a child. So very, very young, I started in the practice. So you would think after all of these long years that it would be simpler along my path. And still for me, it is very hard. There's days where I sit down to meditate and my mind doesn't want to quiet. And there's days that my body wants to fight me. Or there's times where even I walk to my meditation space and my mind is saying, you're too busy, You have too much to do today. You don't have the time for this. You meditate every day. Let's take a break. And the one thing I can say that I like to share is why. Why do we have so much resistance to this practice, which is so beneficial for us? And the reason that we have so much resistance is because our mind and our body want to keep us in the same place. They want to hold on to the identity that is familiar. And so when we meditate, we are shifting ourselves every single time in subtle ways. And so we're changing in every moment that we're meditating. And that is actually scary for the mind and body. So the mind and body have a lot of resistance, but I'm here to say to everyone that when you do meditate and you get that resistance, say to your body and your mind that you're safe. Instead of repeating these ideas that it's challenging or it's hard, reaffirm that you're in a safe space. Because I know that all of your audience, David, isn't here to stay the same. We're all here to grow, to evolve, to change. And so we have to put ourselves into these uncomfortable moments. And meditation for me has been one of the greatest practices I've found to really transform myself in my life. And I assume that you meditate. And so I also assume that most likely you too have these challenging times. So our audience isn't alone.
Yeah, it is the desire to distract oneself from that discomfort. The brain is like, no, 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 don't allow it to come in. I love that description. That is so helpful. Like it is so transformative, and our bodies want to stay in a place of homeostasis, like just the same. And it's challenging us. That's so beautiful. Your chapter in the Awaken Hearts book was so powerful, so riveting. I cannot wait for people to read it. And I want to go into part of your story. But before that, I'd love to take a kind of a rewind to your childhood and hear a little bit about, did you grow up with some sort of faith or spirituality, or was that new for you kind of farther on down the road of life?
And so thank you for bringing this book into the world and for uniting so many people and allowing us to express some of our story and our messaging. And so thank you to you for creating this and giving me the opportunity to write this chapter. And so to answer that question, my story started completely, I know I've listened to a lot of your story where yours started very much in a um, identified path in a religious form, and mine didn't. So my parents did not raise us in any religious pathway, but I was born extremely spiritual. I joke all the time that I think my first words were, "Why am I here? And what is the meaning to all of this?" And so I
Wow.
was just born on this path. I don't know if it's good or bad, but I was born that way. And so one of my first practices was meditation. And so my parents worked a lot and I was alone a lot. And so I meditated. It was just what I did. I didn't know anybody that meditated. I didn't know the word meditation. I just sat and experienced these altered states of consciousness. So it came from very early on. And that was one of the fundamental things that built my path. And there were two other really big elements that kind of got me to where I am today. And so one of the other big factors was my grandma. I spent a lot of time with my grandma, and she had this extraordinary library of books. So when I wasn't meditating, I was reading her books, and they were Ernest Holmes or books like A Course in Miracles or Neville Goddard and all these incredible, you know, spiritual leaders and teachers and philosophers. And she had these ancient manuscripts that would just be stapled together. And at a young age, I didn't understand much of it, but it really kind of set my path. And I remember one day my grandma was picking me up from school, and I was in, I don't know, third or fourth grade. And I was reading a Judy Blume book, and it was called, I think, Hello, God, It's Me, Margaret. And my teacher came to me and she saw me reading this book and she, took it away from me. And that day she decided to walk me out to where my grandma was picking me up. So she walks me out and she gives the book to my grandma and she said, "This is not appropriate for Tiffani to be reading at this age." And so my grandma brought me home and she handed the book back to me and said, "I'm not going to restrict what you're reading. Here, read this book." But then she handed me another book and she said, "But I advise you to read this." And it was Jonathan Livingston Seagull's book. And at the time, again, I was young. And so I read the book and it was a beautiful book about a seagull. But I picked that book back up when I was a teenager and reread it. And I still have the book she gave me. And I reread it throughout life. And I find that there are these hidden, incredible messages within the books. And so all of these books along my path really led me to where I am. I feel like I had hundreds of teachers, and insights to all of this information. And then the third thing that really led me on my path was I had this deep faith. So it wasn't religious based, it was just this deep spirituality from the beginning. And in fact, I had a friend of mine and we would talk and we would say, why are we like this? Why are we sitting around in our teenage years speaking about philosophy, questioning life? We should just be out laughing and joyous and playing. And that's just the way I was from the beginning. And that deep faith really set me on a path. And for a long time, I wanted to understand, where does that come from? Why do I have that faith and so many other people don't
Mhm.
have that faith? And so wanted to eventually, and I went into college to start the path of studying the brain to see, is there a place in the brain where faith exists? So with cats, I know scientists went to go study if they could find a purr. Where does that come from in a cat? So I wanted to find out, is there a place for faith? Is it our pineal gland? And that's where faith is based in our brain. And so my pathway was really led by a lot of phenomenal teachers, including my grandma, and then this spirituality from the time that I was born.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. It's amazing. Those dangerous Judy Blume books, they've got to be
Yeah.
banned. Yeah. So
Yeah.
dangerous. So one of the things that you write, I want to actually read to you and our listeners because this is a pivotal point in your chapter. And you write, I loved studying the brain in college. Its intricate inner workings fascinate me to this day, but nothing I learned prepared me for what happens when the mind stops holding it together. They say you can lose your sense of time, even your connection to the world around you. That was true for me. When I gained full awareness, I was sitting in the middle of a field, surrounded by curious onlookers who seemed as confused by my presence as I was. My face was stained with tears. My feet, somehow missing the black heels I had started the day with, were covered in dirt, and my arms were rippled with goosebumps from a damp cold that I was too numb to feel. I looked up, now fully aware, and said out loud, I know two things for certain. I have to leave my relationship, and I have to leave my job. How did you get into this field that you are referring to? And what happened next after you came to this realization in that moment?
And so I think in so many of our stories, I think you can relate to this most likely in your story, that there sometimes is a breakdown point. And so I reached that. I reached this breakdown point, and I think in that moment, all of my senses just couldn't hold the pain that I was existing anymore. And so neurologically, my brain in its rational senses shut down. And so by the time I regained my cognitive function and my consciousness, I was in this field with cows. And in the book, I really outline the story. So the story goes from this point on. For anyone that hasn't read it, it really carries from this point on my breakdown to not just my breakthrough that so many of us experience, but my breakdown to this extraordinary unfolding of what other people that watched what happened called the miraculous. It really was this full transformation of my whole life. One of the things that I wanna share, if you're okay, is that the story a little bit before the moment in the field, because I feel this really relates to what so many listeners and so many people might also experience, and that's how we can have so many tools, how we can have so much knowledge, and yet we don't use it. And so, that's what I felt like in that moment being immersed with the cows, is I had so many tools that I had learned. I had so much knowledge that I had learned, and in that time, my life was so hard and so painful that I stopped all of it. And so what I share by that is, so I had been meditating my whole life. I had been practicing yoga for years and years, and breath work. I had started teaching yoga. I had all of these ways to manage stress. I had all of these instances, but I also had this incredible life experience that showed me that I could change my circumstances at any time. And I wasn't even tuning into that. And one of those circumstances early that happened for me was really a pivotal point before this story begins. And that was I had been teaching yoga, and one of my primary teachers was a woman called Indra Devi. And Indra Devi is a phenomenal woman if anybody looks into her. She was the first woman to bring yoga to the West. And Indra Devi was from Latvia, but she was in India at one time. And Indra Devi was born with a heart condition. And Krishnamacharya was an impactful figure in the world of yoga. And Krishnamacharya at the time was demonstrating to others the power of yoga. And she watched his demonstration. And in this demonstration, he stopped his heart. Well, because Indra Devi was born with a heart condition, she thought, well, if this yogi can stop his heart and have that much body control and can influence his body like this, maybe I could heal my heart. And now at this time of my life, I had always um, had this illness, this disorder where my hands would shake. In fact, there were many years where I wouldn't even agree to this podcast with you because I was so afraid to be seen in this light. Because if I was nervous, my lip would shake, my eye would shake, my hands would shake. And it was something I really had to overcome. And so I had gone to a neurologist finally when I was in my very early 20s. And the neurologist told me that this was a hereditary disease. No one else in my life had it, but that it was a hereditary disease and it was going to get worse over time. And pretty soon I wouldn't even be able to write. I wouldn't be able to hold anything. And that I would be on a prescription medication for the rest of my life. And this wasn't a story that I wanted to live. And the medication they gave me didn't settle within my body. And so because I had been practicing yoga and read Indra Devi's story, I thought, well, if Krishnamacharya could stop his heart and Indra Devi could heal her heart, I can manage this through meditation, intention, mental rehearsal, and through these practices I knew. And so I did. I completely healed it through just this inner workings of changing my reality. And so when I was in that field of cows, I had already had all of these tools. And I find it so incredible how so many of us, when it's the time in our life, we've known all of these things, we've built all these practices and this knowledge and this information, and how we don't apply it. And so that was one of the most transformational awakenings in that moment that I don't share in the story, that I'm only sharing. Actually, I don't think I've shared this whole story with anybody, but that I'm only sharing now in this moment is how we as humanity kind of live this same thing, that we stop what's most beneficial to us.
I relate to that so much. For me, it wasn't landing in the middle of a field, but it was uh, 17 years ago, walking out of a movie theater with two friends were in the movie theater, and I walked out, and I just began to like walk away, and it just my brain just right, it just broke kind of in that moment. I love how you said you're not prepared for the time when the mind stops holding it together, and I'm just walking down PCH trying to just get away, from all of that. And I was a pastor and had all these tools, right? And knew like if you needed help, you reach out for help, but not able to utilize those tools when you have them. It's hard because unless you've been in that moment where the mind doesn't hold it all together anymore, it's hard to understand that. And it's so easy to stay in a place of judgment on, people that are having those breakdown moments if you haven't been through it, because you just know like, I know what that person's going through, Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the messages in that is to not get to the breakdown. We can shift our lives at any moment. And it's really tuning back into those tools or
Yes.
having a community that assists you in that time. Neither one of us had to get to that point. You were doing
That's
the
right.
same thing I was doing. I just was surrounded by a field of cows and you were surrounded, by on a street. And so it's that coming and tapping, having that remembrance to say, I have so many things that I could utilize in this moment. For me, because I had healed my body already, I had then started to say, well, what else could I do in my life? So I had started to see all this evidence that I could cause an effect in my circumstances. Yet when my circumstances got so hard, I stopped causing any external effect.
Mm,
I was becoming a victim in my circumstances instead of consciously creating anything. And
mhm.
so it really is a message to say, you don't have to get that far. So, but it is
Absolutely.
interesting, you're right, how the mind protects us by kind of shutting us down.
Yeah, yeah. So you're talking about the power of intention and the power to be able to shift the direction of life. What happened after that point? And it's an amazing story that unfolds in your chapter. But the power of your intention, like how did you regain that after that moment and begin to find healing and really a life that you really wanted?
So having that breakdown was kind of really the awakening to a realization of returning to the things that I had already experienced. So I had, like I said, healed my body. And at that moment when that I had that experience, that was a powerful moment in my life because what I realized is I had been studying all of these extraordinary teachers. I had been reading all of these amazing books. I had all of this information. Plus, I was meditating and doing yoga. But what I found was I was also working in the corporate world. So my spiritual world was one world and my corporate world was another.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I discovered that I could heal my body that I recognized how to begin to implement some of these tools into life, how to move from knowledge being conceptual to knowledge being transformational. And so at that time, I started to say, wait a minute, if I could do this, if I can heal, what else can I do? And I kind of started testing and experimenting, influencing my outer experiences saying, well, wait a minute, can I heal a relationship? Could I create a new work opportunity? Can I do these different things? Like, what kind of effect can I cause in my outer world? So I really started to tune into how we really can influence our circumstances. And so when I had that breakdown, and I say that I forgot all of that, the breakdown was the catalyst to start to remember to say, wait a minute, let's bring these practices back down. And for me, unfortunately, I had to completely break down to come back to that remembering, to come back to that reawakening. And so I did start applying all of those tools. I did start to become intentional. And as I became intentional, everything started to shift. So I became intentional using meditation and intention to start to, instead of being, for me personally, I was a victim in my circumstances and I was allowing that to dictate my life. And instead, I started saying, wait, what do I want to experience? And how can I shape my life in that direction instead of this direction? And everything in this extraordinary, most miraculous way really unfolded. And I call it this path from nothing to everything because in my story, I share I had nothing. I had toxic relationships. I had $0 in my bank account. I showed up in Laguna Beach, I think not far from you, and I didn't have anything. My children and I didn't even have a spoon or a fork to eat with. And it was this unfolding, which I won't share today, so I can save it for the chapter in the book. But it was this extraordinary unfolding that happened. But it wasn't something that I just did. It's something that anybody can do. It's just that I had had the life experiences to understand the tools of how to do it.
Hmm. At what point in your life did you begin to shift and say, I want to put my full efforts into helping others with some of these tools and modalities? I know it sounds like you were teaching yoga earlier on in your life. But at what point did you shift to go, okay, I really want to just use my whole life as a vehicle of service?
So I had this profound moment in meditation. I had had all these incredible experiences. I had all these tools, but still, I had been on this search my whole entire life. And I really felt like there was more I was searching for that I still wasn't quite getting the answers to. And kind of a funny story, I had just read Conversations with God. And I really kind of got upset because I had been meditating forever. I had been on the spiritual path forever. And I was like, well, why is God giving all this information to Neil Donald Walsh? And I felt like in that moment, God wasn't talking to me. God, source, universe, whatever anybody else, calls this greater than us, this purpose driven greater than us existence. And so for me, I just thought, well, why is God talking to Neil Diamond Walsh? And I'm just not hearing God's voice. And I had had a lot of downloads and a lot of amazing experiences in meditation, but I just felt like I had been searching for my whole life and was ready for more answers. So one day I took my kids to school and my husband went to work and I didn't have to work on this day. And, in this grand vision in my head, I thought, I'm going to be like Buddha. I am just going to sit here until I get answers. So I sat on my meditation cushion and I said, I'm going to sit here until, I can hear God's voice, until I can understand who am I and what is the purpose to this life. And I sat in meditation and I had this really profound experience of just complete oneness. And so I really experienced being everything. And I experienced being a blade of grass and then being the wind that blows the grass and being the stream and being all of life. And then I experienced being the space between the blades of grass. So both the everything and the nothing that we all are. And it was the most profound and incredible experience that really shifted me. And of course, I got up for meditation, and our crazy minds, the way they work, they want to kind of self sabotage and have this dialogue. And so my mind said, well, great, you became oneness with everything, and that's really profound and beautiful, but did you hear God? And so all of a sudden I thought, well, no. And because so many of my messages come in books, I had gone to where I had some of my books, and it was this linen closet, and I was going to go take a shower. And I opened the closet and to get a towel, and a book falls out face down. And so a lot of times messages comes to me in books, and I open the book and I have it right here. And it was A Course in Miracles. And the page that it opened to was this page that says, God's voice speaks to me all throughout the day. And so it was this remembrance to say, what are you thinking? It's like been there this whole entire time. You're just not listening in the right way, or you're thinking that somebody else's experience and somebody else, the way they have it is the way I would have it. And so this oneness experience allowed me to live for a few days in complete bliss, to really see how beautiful life is, how extraordinary we are as people and as humans. And so for about 2 days, I was on top of the world. And then what happened is I started to recognize that nobody else had the experience that I had, that people weren't seeing that deep connection. They weren't living in their fullest potential. In fact, a lot of people are suffering. They're in lack, they're in pain, they're hurting. And I began to take on other people's emotions and their hurt. And then I began to feel all of humanity's suffering. And I was carrying the weight of all of it. And in that moment is when I shifted to say, instead of what can I do and how can I use these tools to enhance my life, it was what can I do to assist others through their own suffering, to awaken them to their potential in this divine spark of, that we all are. And so that was really my true awakening, to shift from I to what I call a focus on we.
Hmm. Talk to us about the Altruistic app. How did this vision come about to you? Maybe even just tell us what it is to begin with, and then when and how did this vision come to you?
So it came to me really pretty much after that time to say, how can I assist in alleviating, or how can I put my life as service for humanity? And so it first came in that moment, and like so many ideas, we put them off into kind of this maybe category, maybe someday. It seemed like a really big project, and I didn't know how to even go about it or how to start. And then it seemed like the world just kind of was getting crazier and crazier. And it came to a pressing need to feel like there was something needed in the world to bring us together, to unite us. And one of the things that kept kind of playing out for me was this awareness that what we focus on expands. And that's been said by many, many teachers. Even in Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, Dr. Joe Dispenza says, where we place our energy, where we place our attention, where our attention goes, our energy goes, right? Where our attention goes, our energy goes. And so which is very true. I'd experienced that in my life through all the things that I had consciously created in my life. But it made me very fearful of where are we putting our attention collectively? And so more than ever before, we are tuned into all the events and everything that are happening in the world. And so if I go on social media, if I go on X, I am consciously or subconsciously seeing all the problems that we have going on in the world. And so are we then collectively co-creating those problems of the world? But what I wanted was somewhere to then say, okay, I've seen all the problems in the world, but what platform can I now go to where I can begin to co-create what I do want to experience, the future that we all really do want to live. And there wasn't a platform for that. And that is one of the catalysts that started on altruistic, is to say we need to build a platform where we can begin to co-create what we do want to experience, where when we begin to say, instead of talking about all the problems, let's talk about what do we want to experience for humanity's future. And when we can first do like what I do with intention, where I always start with the intent, where I always start with kind of this energetic blueprint, let's start with an altruistic as this energetic blueprint for humanity's future. And let's then start the dialogue. So then after we've created it in our minds and in our hearts, we then can go take action to live it in the world. And so there was a lot of different events that happened that allowed me to get to the place. But it was really saying, how can I assist others? How can I be a service? And how can I build a tool that I didn't feel existed at the time that we could take everywhere with us? And so it was
Mm.
purposely built as an app because we have our phones with us everywhere. And how beautiful to turn our phones into a conscious space instead of what it can possibly be used for now.
Now, did you have any tech background in building apps, or was this new for you?
So, slightly, I had been running medical practices and I was slightly involved with building a medical practice, like a digital medical records app in my career, very minimally. So, no, it was terrifying. And the reason that it took me so long to get started was because I didn't know. One, I felt like most tax people were in their 20s. I wasn't the right demographic. I didn't have all of the background. I didn't have all the knowledge. I had no idea how to get started. And not only that, I had this vision, but I had no idea. How are people going to interact with this? What is it going to look like? What is the user experience as you scroll through it? How am I ever going to do this? And I think that's what so many people feel. I mean, I would guess that there was a part of that even when you started Awaken Magazine of I have this vision, right? Because we all start with this extraordinary vision we want to bring into the world, but how am I going to do it? But then it takes kind of this courageous step forward into the unknown to say, let me take the first step. And so I started just I meditated, of course, everything starts with meditation in my world and intention. So I meditated to ask, what would this look like? How would how would it work? I asked for signs and then I took the first step.
Amazing. And what were the roadblocks that you came up against in the process, and how did you kind of overcome those?
So many roadblocks. So many roadblocks with not fully having the experience. So a lot of learning curves, a lot of aligning maybe with the wrong people that I brought in. A lot of, I think, what all of us at some point have a lot of uncertainty. A lot of, is anyone going to understand this? Is anyone going to get it? How am I going to share it? What if I build this and no one comes? So, a lot of those self doubt, those voices in the head that come through for most of us, where they come through in the projects that are most centered in our hearts. And so tremendous. It was supposed to be a 6-month to build project. It took 3 years. We built this massive platform, and still to this day, we're working on getting a lot more content out so people can understand. There's so much you can do in the app, but a lot of people go into it and they only see the first screen, so they have no idea all that you can do. So there's definitely a lot of roadblocks, but at the same time, at the core of it is my heart and my mission and my lived experience and the desire to bring people together so that we can co-create better lives for ourselves, for each other, and for humanity. And so
Hmm.
that's what always lives through every day that becomes a challenge.
hmm So on a practical, like on the practical side, help us understand. We log in. I downloaded it yesterday. I got signed up. I started looking at like a couple of posts that people had. I don't know if posts is the right language, but like tell us practically what you will experience when you log onto the app. I'm hearing the benefit. The benefit is it's shifting my intention. It's helping me focus on more positive things, helping us do that collectively. But practically, what does that look like in terms of my interactive experience?
So my experience that I just shared a little bit of kind of started with right? So it started with me transforming my life, my healing, and then my outer experience. And then my life transformed into how can I be of service? And it evolved into a we, how can I serve others? And then it evolved into more of a vision of all. How can I impact more of all the collective? And that's really built into altruistic. And so what you're asking is a big question, and the information isn't out there. And so it can enhance your life. And how does it enhance your life? Well, just like I set an intention for this call, and just like I set intentions throughout my day, altruistic is a powerful tool to do that as well. And so some of the questions that we get is we have 72 seconds for a meditation, 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And 72 seconds for a lot of people that might have meditated before seems so quick. Like, why would I ever use that? And yet 72 seconds is really powerful for enhancing your own life. And why is that powerful? It's powerful because maybe in the morning I meditate on a state of wealth or a state of a different experience. But as you go throughout your day, circumstances happen. And that could be circumstances that stress you out, could be feeling overwhelmed. It could be no longer living in alignment with that future version of yourself that you want to create. And so the 72 seconds is a quick way to shift your state. You can move into a state of gratitude really quickly. You can realign with this future version of yourself. And so it's a really, really quick and impactful way to do that. And so then, besides yourself, and a lot of times, or many even athletes will use mental rehearsal to train their body and mind to live in the experience ahead of actually having the experience. And you can do that same thing in altruistic by creating your own personal intentions that nobody else sees. But in another way, it's a way to give to another. And so a great example of that is the other night, um, a woman, her husband had gotten into a car accident, and I didn't know either of them. And a friend of mine called me and she said, a good friend of hers was in a car accident. Could I bring people together to quickly intend and to meditate for this other person? And it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I jumped out of bed. I said, of course. I quickly put an image that would represent his healing and called a couple of people to join us in the app. We had it set for a certain time so that we would all come together because there's a scheduling feature. We all came together in the same moment. And within just a matter of minutes, we were all in the app and we were meditating for this man none of us had met.
Hmm.
And whether our group intention and our group meditation affected any of his healing, none of us can know because science can't fully measure the power of intention and meditation.
hmm
But what did happen is this woman called me the next day. We had never spoken. And she said, I was sitting in the waiting room of the hospital while my husband was in surgery. And she said, I felt so isolated and alone. But she came on the app at the same time. She saw all of us because within the app, you can see everybody that's joining. She
hmm
saw all of us there, people she didn't even know that took time out of their night, woke up from their sleep
hmm
to meditate for her husband. All of a sudden, she was uplifted. He was uplifted. And so, whether our meditation caused any effect in his healing, what did cause effect in his healing is he felt supported, not alone, and all of a sudden uplifted. And when you're uplifted, in a state of healing, that has its own miraculous benefit. And so this was a way that we could hold intention for someone else, which you can do in the app. And then as we move from others, we move to the world and for humanity and all the things that are happening in the world. And for so many of us, we feel like we're powerless. And so altruistic brings a way for you to make a difference. And
hmm
so from there's plenty of studies, and I've researched it on my own. Um, Prayer groups, meditation groups, intention groups. There's a beautiful book. It's called The End of Violence, which talks about these different people that came into meditation during war times and the amazing effects that happened based on collective meditation. And
Mm.
so, why would we not take even just a few minutes out of our day to start to meditate together? And there's a lot of amazing meditation teachers out there that will bring to get people together every few months. But on Altruistic, you can jump on every single day and hold these big picture things in your mind and your heart and in your meditations. And so this is why Altruistic is such a big platform and why I designed it to meet you where you are, whether it's to enhance your life, to support another, and that could be on a healing journey, a business journey, or for the bigger global things that we're all facing.
So anyone can post something that is their intention. Is that what I'm hearing publicly? And then people can join with them in that in that intention?
Correct. So anybody can choose how they want to interact. So there is a feed. It almost looks like social media, which can scare a lot of people away. But when you dive deeper, you see it's so much more. It was designed to be super user friendly so that it could look like a platform you're used to. But when
Mhm.
you dive even deeper, you understand there's so much more. So yes, you can post to what you could call the public timeline so anybody can contribute to that. You can also do it privately. So, David, I could, for instance, create a meditation intention around the Awaken Hearts book for an intention that maybe it transforms lives for each of the readers or whatever the vision is behind the book. And I
Mhm.
can invite you and the other people that contributed to the book so we can really hold that in our hearts and our
Mm.
minds and nobody else sees it.
Mm.
It's just us. Or you can do it personally. So, for instance, like I said at the beginning of this call, I meditate and intend for all the important things. Well, I meditate and intend for almost everything throughout my day. So if I'm going to the gym, for instance, which I'm going to pull up an intention to see my fitness the way that I would like it to be instead of in the reality that I'm living right now. And I have an intention that I have created in altruistic to be able to see my fitness before I work out.
Mhm.
Or if I'm having a stressful day and I'm not in alignment, or I'm going back to a past pattern of maybe feeling judgmental, or one of those human characteristics that I'm still working to evolve from, that I can have a personal intention where my heart is expanded, or I'm more compassionate, or I'm showing up in a more kind way. So it doesn't always have to be these external things. It can be the internal states
Mhm.
for anyone that has an addiction to really be able to see themselves in a different state so that when they're facing those challenges, they have something to turn to recognize that future state that they want to align with. And so there's so many things to be able to achieve within altruistic.
Mhm. One of the things that you talk about in your chapter, and you definitely, I sense that you embody it. You share about this experience that you had in Bali where you came to the realization that the more you gave, the more you received. And so I'm curious about how we can experience that reciprocal power of altruism or generosity, but without burning out. Like so many of us, right? Give, give, give. And then we don't feel like we're receiving. How does that work for you where you feel like there is that reciprocity?
And that's a really great question because you're right. We do burn out through giving. And so before I started altruistic, when I had that meditation moment of oneness, after that, I joined all these meditation, prayer, and intention groups, countless ones, to really understand our collective impact together. So I knew my power at this point, but what could we achieve together? And was there a difference when we brought groups of people together? Now, from my experience and everything I experienced, it was profound. It was meditation and meditation groups can elevate the whole of the group in a really incredible way. And so that also echoes through an intention. An intention held by others really seemed to be that it amplified this energy. And so sometimes we think of giving as financial or these big things that we do, and it's not. I found that when I gave, and there's a couple reasons for this, which I'll share, my life transformed more than when I was focused on my life. And so in Bali, I did. I went to Bali to study with healers. I'm always really um, intrigued by different healing modalities and different ways people use energy and intention and prayer and meditation. And so I went to experience these different ways that these healers were working with these modalities. And um, it was so profound to take the energy and the attention off of myself and to fully give to somebody else. And what happens is we're no longer focused on, for instance, if you're in pain in your own healing, you're no longer focused on your pain. If you're in lack, you're no longer focused on your lack. It's a really interesting way to shift your state. And when you're no longer paying attention to things that aren't going exactly as you would like in your life, it takes the attention off of them and everything shifts. But there's also a lot of science behind altruism, that says that when we give, our feel good chemicals, oxytocin, serotonin, all of these things are released. And that's extraordinary. Our state is quickly shifted. So in altruistic, we built a tool that you can do that quickly. You can quickly go on and you can meditate for somebody else's healing journey. And in that, those same chemicals are being released. But there's ways without using altruistic that we can all experience altruism, from kindness to even a kind thoughts, because it's proven that our thoughts are affecting more than just ourselves. They are information that's being sent outward and being received by another. So a kind thought, a kind word, a kind act. And so I think just the way that you embody it in everyday life, that doesn't seem like it's I have to do this, but it's I'm choosing to serve. And sometimes service seems like it's this big grand thing that we have to do. And it's really the small acts that we do every day on how we treat our fellow people around us, how we show up in the world, how we lead, how we serve. And there's so many ways to express kind of this altruism.
Hmm. Beautiful. Okay, people want to learn more about altruistic, download the app. Where should they go?
So our website has a lot of information. The one key element with altruistic is the spelling. It is ALL, which means all, like everything, all of us. It's the collective. It's everything that exists. True, TRUE. And that means that it's already true. So in intention and in meditation, one of the things we work through is really already being in the state of that you would like to experience. So in altruistic, everything is all true. Instead of focusing on your healing journey, you're focusing on your healed state. So it's already true. And then istic is to simulate altruism, simulate being altruistic. And so it's ALLTRUEistic. And there's a lot of information on our website. But yes, the app is free. We made it free because we really want to bring a global community together, and it's important to us. So you can download it for free in both the Apple Store and the Google Play stores.
And of course, we'll link to that website in all of our show notes, of course, as well as your Instagram and social media and all those good things. A final question for you. I'm curious, what do you personally want to be remembered for when your life is complete on this earth? What is that legacy
And
that you want to leave behind?
that's such a beautiful question. What I want to be remembered by is the same principles I've spoken by. It's really to build this global community, really passionate about uniting and bringing people together, and to build this global community that unites their hearts and minds around a common vision for healing, for peace, for a better world. And they feel through both uniting people and assisting in activating the things that they've forgotten and activating their innate creative power in bringing us together. That's the way we really create a more evolved future for all of us and for humanity.
Beautiful. Tiffani, thank
Before we
you.
end this, I would like to
Yeah, yeah.
hear, David, and to turn it back to you. I would absolutely love to hear what would be your answer to that question.
That's good. Hmm. For me, I sense, not a sense, I know that I'm called to be a, a tool of amplification. That I see good things in the world, but for whatever reason, I feel this calling to amplify the goodness in other people, in what they're doing, because if I can help them, get that message out there. And that has been true from when I was a pastor, I felt like I was motivating people to serve humanity. To the film projects that I've done, I've focused on people that are doing good work and amplified their, messages. And with the magazine and what we're doing here, that is the complete focus. But I see me helping others reach larger audiences to bring more of that love, healing, transformation, and awakening to our world. And ultimately, I see that as a global impact. Awaken Magazine is just getting started. Like, we're barely off the ground, a year in. And, I have a very large vision of how that has the potential to influence humanity. And there's lots of people doing great things, but for whatever reason, it's just what's inside of me. And so when I hear the vision that you've been given, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love that you're creating this app that gives people a platform for intention and meditation. And I love that you're bringing your unique skill set to the table and your unique way of articulating it. And also, one of the things that's so fascinating about the people that I meet is that it's a wide cross section of personalities and styles and communication skills. Oftentimes, kind of in the spiritual consciousness community, can be a bit of like a earthy, hippie, kind of flavor to that. And that's part of it. But also, like, when I'm with you, connecting with you, I'm like, this woman is like a classy, corporate, strategic, heart-centered, strategist who's like out to change the whole world. And that's what I love about Awakened, is we have the ability to see there's no certain vibe or certain way of living out consciousness, mindfulness, spirituality. It comes in all different shapes and forms and genders and socioeconomic levels and personalities that everybody's needed to bring their little part to the table. And my role, I feel like, is to do my very best to amplify and encourage and call people out to go, yes, you can do this. Let's go. That's why I love even your story of having a vision for an app and going, oh my gosh, have you ever done this before? Have you, what were the roadblocks? Because everything that I've done, I haven't done it before, but I didn't know how to do a documentary. My first documentary was on Netflix. I didn't know how to start a church. Like, I just did it, right? I didn't know how to start a magazine. I've never done this before. You figure it out because it's the vision inside, right? The vision is the key. The point, like, also one of the things I love about your story is I don't hear that you're in love with apps. You're in love with transforming humanity. The app is just a methodology. It's a modality. It's a vehicle, right? I don't even care about magazines. I don't even care about podcasts. Who cares, right? I don't care about books. These are just like tools. That's it, right? The goal is love and healing and transformation. All of these just happen to be, cultural tools that we utilize in order to make it happen. So I'm inspired by your story, and I just appreciate how you're leveraging all your gifts and talents and your heart to make a difference in the world. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story today. Really appreciate it.
I love what you're bringing into the world. So thank you for that.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and our other conversations, would you mind taking a moment to leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? That's one of the ways that you can give back to the show and help us reach more people. And of course, feel free to share the episode with a friend. And if you're not already on our email list, we send out an inspiring email every Monday morning full of articles and interviews. Just head on over to awakenedmagazine.com and click subscribe and join for free. Our hope is that all the resources we share will help our world continue awakening to love.